What's up, guys? Welcome to Nutmegged, the podcast where a Yank and a Brit talk about the beautiful game from across the pond. I'm, of course, Faisal, representing the UK, currently in Dubai at the moment, and we have Andrew holding down the fort in the US of A. How are you today, bud?
Life is good, my man. I cannot complain. However, I feel like we're getting hot temperatures just like you're having over there. Our heat index is over 100, which is probably a normal day for you,
Whoa.
but we're actually having to have a smaller, shorter practice because of how the heat's going on over here.
It's feeling the heat, man. It's good. It is getting hot, way much hot here as well. Honestly, the humidity today was outrageous. You spoke a bit about bringing practice indoors. Do you want to just kind of what's the latest with yourself? What's going on with yourself?
Yeah, so head coach over at Terra State. I know I talked about that a little bit. So our season has officially kicked off. We played our first game on Saturday. We have a very small squad. We have a 14-player roster. So that is quite an experience in and of itself. And we're playing against other community colleges in Ohio and throughout Michigan. There are some very good schools, and there are some schools on a similar level of they have a smaller roster. So we played Lorraine on Saturday. We got a 4-1 win. We had our left back who has only played soccer for 1 year. He was our starting left back, held down the fort for most of the game. Fairly solid performance for still just kind of learning the game. But yeah, hey, can't complain. A 4-1 victory, starting off the season 1-0. We have a good test coming up on Wednesday, so that should be fun. We'll see how it goes. If you're interested in following along, we have our Terra State Instagram. So it's just at Terra State Soccer if you want to follow the ride. I post behind the scenes stuff and some of the cool stuff that we have going on with some of our players too. So it's a cool time.
Nice. Definitely give that a follow. Speaking of the start of the season, we have, of course, started the Premier League. In fact, all season started now. We've got we've got Serie A, we have the French leagues, the Ligue 1, the Liga started as well. So it's been quite an interesting start to the season. We've had a couple of mixed bag performances across as well, which will be interesting for us to digest as we get into this. Obviously, there's a lot of transfer in the market as well, so we'll pick up on a few of those potential rumours as well, and then also we'll get into more of the kind of current topics we have, referring perhaps to Cristiano Ronaldo and a certain YouTuber, as well as amongst other things as well. So excited to get stuck in. Let's begin this whole sort of podcast off with this particular episode with the start of the Premier League. But what you got for us?
Yeah, so let's look at some of the recent games happening in the Premier League. We are 2 weeks in, so we're starting to kind of get a feel for what teams are going to be good, what teams are still trying to feel stuff out, and then some of the teams that are going to be struggling this season. And based on some of our predictions, I think we've picked some of those teams correctly. But the cool part about the Premier League season, you never know what's going to happen. But let's talk first 2 weeks of what has been going down. So a lot of action to talk about. And the very first topic that we should be talking about, Manchester United. This one could be interesting because I'm very curious to get your take on some of this because we've not broken down what we've thought Manchester United have looked like so far this season. So first matchup was against Fulham. They did get a 1-0 victory, but it was not convincing in the slightest. I mean, a 1-0 victory over Fulham. You expect that from a mid-table team trying to fight out, claw a victory. That should not be happening from a Manchester United perspective, who are aiming to try to look top 4 this season, which I don't think they'll get, but you do. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But really, nothing spectacular in that game. Thankfully, pulling out a win. Kind of the same type of match in the second week, which is going up against Brighton, but in the last minute, they end up losing 2-1. So really, first 2 games for Manchester United not looking strong, and I'm curious to get your feedback on both of those games. What's the vibe from you?
Yeah, I think I went in very positive at the start of the season. I'm watching the first maybe 35, 40 minutes of the first game. I'm like, okay, maybe we're getting somewhere. Mazraoui, who we got in, was fantastic. I'm thinking maybe this is probably the player that we needed, and we're gonna, we haven't even got Delict on at that point. So I'm thinking this is going particularly well. Good start, but then I just felt again, and after the second half, felt like the identity still isn't there yet. And we managed to get the goal, but again, that I know you probably saw the game, but that last minute Rashford to Garnacho, for me, really just felt like it undid all that work. We're going to remember that. Actually, the victory's done, but it just felt like that was really, I didn't want to say it, but almost kind of foreshadowing of potentially the season or what we have to kind of install, because Rashford, I'm sorry, was not not great. And even going into the second game was just not on point at all. And I don't know whether there's going to be a point where he's going to get dropped. And it's not good, because I think he's a fantastic player, right? And that second game for me, it had Brighton written all over it. They were the stronger team. Going into that game, I felt a little bit less confident on the back of that first game, and I felt like they just got a lot more strength in those areas. João Pedro, we know, is very good. Danny Welbeck as well, coming into start of a very good season after a very good preseason. So it felt very much like we weren't prepared, we weren't ready. We're still doing that kind of Maguire at the back, bringing De Ligt on randomly, which I think sometimes affects the game a little bit potentially. Still no identity, in my opinion, still. I'm not worried, obviously, yet. It's still... I don't think we're completely we're going to go into a poor run of games, so I feel like we're confident. And for me, we've now got that one loss of the season out the way. That's how I'm looking at it, right? So we end up winning the Premier League, right? I'm manifesting it here, right? So we end up winning the Premier League, and the one game we lose is this Brighton game. So if we put that into perspective, we're going forward. What are you thinking?
That's quite the perspective. Yeah, I am not as high as you are. So with that being said, the goal that was scored in the Fulham game was actually a player I had on my Premier League roster. Had him starting up top. It's your boy Zirkzee. He got the goal in the end. Little tap in to finish off that game. So Zirkzee scoring, which was exciting. So that was pretty cool. That made me feel validated as a Manchester United supporter by picking him and putting him in my Premier League starting lineup for him to score, which I did have him in my starting lineup again this week by default, because I didn't even look at my Premier League lineup, unfortunately, for week 2, and it didn't go so hot. And your boy Zirkzee not doing it for me, unfortunately. I'm in kind of the same boat as you, though, other than your high prediction of Premier League champions, because it is stressful. Still, it's still the feeling of what you got last year when you watched Manchester United. You're right. There's not a true identity yet. They're not playing free-flowing soccer, and it's not consistent week over week. So I'm still unsure of where they're going to land and what they're trying to do. Now, that being said, we're still so early in the Premier League season. There's a whole lot of time to get stuff structured, figured out, and sorted. So I'm not super worried yet. However, I still have that inkling now from last year that I have the same nervous feelings. So that's not going away, which is a little bit scary.
I was going to say, you carry on. I was going to talk about the new potential transfer Ugarte coming in.
We do have some transfers that are going to happen. So, potentially going to happen, which also there's actually a piece that makes me a little bit nervous of that as well. So let's look at United's transfers very quickly, because we're still in the transfer window. There's still time for things to happen. With the transfers that have come in and potential transfers, does that make you feel better? I would assume yes. Does it make you feel a little scared because maybe there's not a full plan in action for transfers? Maybe that's how I feel a little bit. Where's your vibe sitting?
Yeah, very similar to yourself. It feels like we have obviously got a few areas that we want to improve, and we've just kind of gone out and just plugged those gaps. It feels like there's not really much creativity in terms of the players you've kind of bought in. I think if you look at a full strength squad, we've got Rasmus Højlund and Zirkzee up front. That's a solid pair, but there's a lack of experience here, in my opinion. I felt like we kind of needed, not saying like an Osimhen, potentially like a solid striker we can rely on. So there's that area. Obviously, we needed Kobbie Mainoo in the middle of the park. Someone needed to support him, because you can't keep having Casemiro carrying games. So I think that Ugarte potential is going to really be great in that middle park, really unlock that kind of false nine, Bruno on the middle with Rashford and Ahmad, who's been one of our star players this season. So I feel that it just feels like a bit of an off balance somewhere in that space. Yes, we've got that. Obviously, of course, Dylan Yoro. That was an unfortunate mistake in terms of him and his injury. He's out for a few months. Then you got De Ligt, who I'm a fan of, but just bringing him in randomly, I just wanted to see a starter game. I wanted to get into that sort of area. So they've definitely been good purchases, but they don't really fill me with wow, we are pushing for something. They feel like transfers that should have happened last season, and it feels like transfers that probably think, hey, what's the minimum we can pay? What's the minimum we can get away with, which are solid players? If you think of likes of, for example, Zirkzee, not really on Man City's list, not really on Chelsea. No one's really chasing these sorts of players, right? And you think, should we really be measuring up with that? Is that something that we should be getting? Yeah. So yeah, mixed bag. I'm hoping they kind of come through, but we'll see. What are your thoughts?
I feel like our transfer strategy still feels a little bit too Ed Woodwardy for me, because when we had Ed Woodward in doing all of our transfers, it was just pick a name, try to spend a bunch of money, pull that name in just because other people have talked about that individual before. I feel like it's almost the same with just a little bit of a different flavor now, because like what, 3 of the 4 top transfers that we brought in have played under Erik ten Hag before. So do we have a legit strategy where we're trying to really build something, or is it just we're bringing in players that Erik ten Hag knows, so he feels like he can build a system with that? Now, if it was a bit more structured and he had a system in place where we could visualize how Manchester United was already playing, and then you're trying to get pieces that fit into that system, and Ten Hag just knows those players, so they would slot into a certain space well in that formation or in that system he's trying to play. But I still just don't feel like there's a system. So then it seems like now he's just bringing in players that would make him comfortable because he knows them. And I mean, I don't necessarily want to put the players down because like they're all decent players and they could play a role, but I just wish that there was a system that made me feel more comfortable about the players that are coming in. So I don't hate the transfers because they all have talent and I think they all could be good pieces. I'm just a bit nervous how they're going to be used because I don't feel like there's the right structure in place quite yet.
It just feels like when you've kind of gone to a new workplace and you just bring in loads of your old work colleagues with you, just because we had a great year. We had one of our most highest performing years. Let's bring, Josh from accounts back in, and let's bring in these players and then try and these colleagues back in to kind of recreate the energy and the vibe we had from the previous season. It just feels like we're it's kind of going Ten Hag, what Ten Hag wants he's going to get. And maybe that's the angle of, look, we had a poor season, but we're going to give you a solid season. And you know what? We're actually going to back you in the transfer market. Who do you want? This is on you. You don't make the performances that we need, then it's your own fault. Right? We've given you the players. You've gone out in the market and got the players that you worked in the past. You technically have no more excuses. Maybe that's part of it.
Yeah, I understand that too. And actually, I'm looking at some other transfer news. I'm curious to get your thought on this one. So I know there's always been drama with Sancho, and I've wanted Sancho out last season. Didn't happen. It's just too much drama at Manchester United in general. If you have drama with players, just get them out and just restart because it'll be better for the players so they can get a fresh start. Plus, Manchester United just needs less drama altogether inside of that mix. So Sancho has been rumored to be leaving at some point. I just saw this headline. There's now a talk going on between Chelsea for a swap deal happening where Sancho goes to Chelsea and then we get, who was it? The Sterling. I was going to say the guy that runs like with dinosaur arms, but yeah, I couldn't think of his name. So Sterling. So swap deal. How do you feel?
Well, funny that. So that was actually going to be, I'm going to throw it back to you because this is actually going to be my take it or leave it. So you're actually ahead of schedule here. But what I was going to say, and was going to bring up that news in particular. So as we spoke about, the potential swap deal is Sancho, and it's Raheem Sterling and Ben Chilwell potentially as a swap deal. So take it or leave it, Raheem Sterling and Ben Chilwell for Sancho. What are you saying?
Wow, I'm going to take that 1,000%. I would honestly take that deal if it was just Chilwell coming the other way and we were ditching Sancho. I mean, Sterling is maybe a benefit. Now, I'll talk this through. I'm still going to take it regardless because I just want Sancho out. No shade to him. He's just got to go figure himself out. Granted, I don't think Chelsea's the place to go figure yourself out with the mismanagement that's been happening, the crazy roster. But hey, that's on him. Whatever that deal is going to look like, good luck to him. If us bringing those two players in, Ben Chilwell, I think, is a great player. He adds a lot of depth. I think he really can find a spot at Manchester United and do well because he can go forward, but he's also a solid defender, so he can be useful. I would love to just have him straight up. However, the questionable piece to me is Sterling for multiple different reasons to his past. So he's played at Man City and Liverpool. Now, like completing the trifecta, now going to United, like that's a little weird. I'm not a huge person on a player coming to a club of a rival club. Like, I don't think that matters a ton to me unless it's like an icon of one of those teams. I don't know if Sterling is on that level. Maybe he was previously, but now I feel like the vibe of him going to all these different clubs maybe dampens it a little bit. So I'm not super worried about that piece. However, the other element is his wages. So he's on like 300,000, maybe it was 500,000 or something crazy a week. So are we going to be just taking over that deal? So if a swap deal happens, usually that means a contract will be broken. So then the teams then get to renegotiate what that deal looks like with the club. So that being said, I'm gonna be nervous because he's gonna want a lot of money still, and that was some of the argument that was happening with Chelsea as well. They don't want to pay that huge wage bill. That's why he's been sitting out a lot of stuff. So the wage part, I think, is really the scariest element to me. I think he's a decent player. I think he could add some value. We need some help. Rashford just doesn't look the same. Maybe this will inspire him to try to get a little bit more competitive, or at least we'll have another option to toss into the mix. So that could be positive, but I'm nervous about bringing Sterling in for those mixing pot of reasons, and particularly the wage part. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm actually a bit of the opposite. So for me, I certainly think that Sterling's a bit of a no-brainer. I think we have people in the midfield that, if you imagine like an England Raheem Sterling or a Man City Raheem Sterling, like, how would you not want that at Manchester United? So for me, yes, the wages may be a bit much, but we've got Anthony on, I don't know how many 100,000s, right? Like, we've got players that perhaps are on very bloated salaries anyway. So for me, it kind of, like, I'm less worried about that, and I would love Sterling. I love Chilwell as well. However, I recently looked into his injury record, and he is about the same amount of games as Luke Shaw. And look, we love Luke Shaw, right? Great player, one of England's best performing sort of defenders in the previous and in the World Cup, and a great player for Manchester United. But it just feels like there's little echoes of that, and maybe will his injury record be an issue? Like, I feel like, of course we need him, but is he really going to be like a Luke Shaw 2.0 in terms of out for a large amount? And he's also going to want a lot of wages. But I overall would absolutely love to have both those players in this squad. Thinking about the Europa League, we've got FA Cup runs, potentially League Cup, and also the Premier League run-up, right? Like, these players we're going to need to rely on come December, January, for example, when it's packed, where we've got that December kind of run around Boxing Day, New Year's Eve, Christmas, then when they've got a lot of matches, and these players have really come through. And I really like Sterling. I think he's a great player, plays a lot off the pitch. So if he can come in, bring that form into play, 100% I'll take him. But yeah, the whole Man City Liverpool situation is a bit icky, shall we say.
Yeah, I understand the vibe too. Yeah, injury stuff always makes me nervous as well. But granted, I think bringing in those two players for swapping Sancho is a plus, because I don't want Sancho anyway. So just getting him out and then being able to bring in maybe two players that could make a difference, I'm happy to give it a try, as long as, yeah, like I said, wages work out. Now, I want to talk to you about a couple Premier League things that are happening that are also kind of related to Sterling. So I think there was a potential rumor that I was hearing about Sterling maybe going to Everton, because Sterling and Chilwell have been locked out of training essentially from Chelsea. Chelsea already knew they wanted to get rid of both of them in some fashion. So there were all the rumors circling of where could these players go, and Everton needs some help. And I think Sterling would have been a great person to plug into that lineup, because automatically a starter would play almost every single game. Looking at Everton so far in the season, they have lost both of their matches 3-0 and then 4-0. So the second one was against Tottenham. The first one was against Brighton. So not the best start to the season. I have them in my relegation zone. You think that they will just squeak by and stay. What is the vibe right now, do you think, around the Everton camp, especially for you?
Part of me thinks it's too early to call, but I do think something needs to be drastically done in defence here, because how are you shipping 7 goals in 2 games? And granted, against good opposition, and maybe their run potentially improves going on a little later on. Because I don't think they play any more of the top 6 in the next 10 games, do they? So I think that should hopefully relieve that, but I'm not feeling too confident at all. I don't think they've made any massive moves in the transfer market either. I think a lot of people are like, maybe this is Calvert-Lewin's kind of like start. Remember that a couple of seasons ago where everyone in the Fantasy Premier League, everyone had that Calvert-Lewin. He was scoring, going to the England squad, like, was on a crazy run. So yeah, I am worried. I am a little bit worried, to say the least. But we'll see how it pans out, mate. We still got, when is the transfer market? It's in 10th, is it 10 days or?
It's coming up.
It's coming up, isn't it? I think it's 10th.
Yeah, it's like within the next 10 days, week or so. Yeah, so there's still time for stuff to happen, but we'll see.
There's stuff to happen, yeah.
With Everton struggling, I I feel bad for them, especially because I put them in the relegation zone. However, on the top of the table, the top teams looking strong in the first 2 weeks. So comparing that to Everton just don't look up for it in those first two matches. Like no real system. The players just aren't there for it. They just don't have the right levels going up against the competition that they've played. But when it comes to Arsenal, Man City, and Liverpool, all of them looking good, looking like they're starting the season off strong, have the right structures in place. I think all of those teams won by 2 goals or more in the first week. And one of those, Manchester City, running over Chelsea as well. So when it comes to the top of the table, I'm feeling pretty confident. I knew those 3 were my top 3. How do you feel that looks for those top 3, as well as comparing it to Manchester United?
I mean, it's business as usual, right? For City especially. It feels like now they don't even celebrate victories yet because they're just so like, this is another day. We've got a big mission to kind of to lead here, and we need to win the Premier League and we need to win more cups. So yes, we've beat a team, but we just keep it moving. And it's very much like no one's really bats an eyelid when Haaland scores a hat-trick anymore, which is mind-blowing for a player to come to the Premier League and it's like, oh, he got a hat-trick. Cool. Like, it's so expected. Ipswich did well, to be fair. I don't know if you watched that game, but getting that first goal and the way they played in that first game as well against Liverpool in that first half, I was like, wow, okay, and maybe you were right. I was like, maybe this Ipswich team is going to pull something out potentially. But yeah, I mean, that whole Chelsea game as well with that 6-2 against Wolves, like, fair play. I mean, they would have to come back from that from that City game, so fair play. Arsenal again. I mean, you know how it is, right? They've got solid centre backs. They've got players coming off the bench. I think Trossard scored with his first touch of the game. Crazy. They've got the squad depth as well. Great performance. In Liverpool again. This is actually scary now because these clubs, I personally think, and as you kind of spoke about in terms of comparison to Manchester United, are so far ahead in terms of consistency, in terms of identity, and in terms of actual performances that it's not looking good. And this is granted just 2 games, but how can you see such immediately a clear identity in a Liverpool team with a new manager and not with a Man United Ten Hag manager who's been over a couple of seasons now? 4 seasons, 3-4 seasons, and nothing's really clicked yet. So what are you thinking?
Yeah, it makes me nervous as a Manchester United fan, seeing just how consistent and solid the other teams are. But when it comes to Chelsea, I'm curious to get your thoughts because, yes, going against Manchester City is always tough. Plus, the Ipswich Town real quickly, man, going up against Liverpool and Man City in the first 2 weeks, like that is a tough start. But like, still looked kind of exciting. I still expect big things from them. I don't think that they're going to be able to make it out of the relegation zone, but I do think they're going to be exciting to watch this season. So that's the prediction I'm going with for them. But Chelsea, their roster is still ginormous. I have no idea what strategy they're trying to use. Like, I don't know if Todd Bowley's playing 4D chess or what, just trying to like short the market of good players and then just have the inventory to be able to sell higher, like a stock type of game or something. No idea what is going down, how that is even going to work with FFP rules. But they do get a 6-2 victory over Wolves in a kind of wild game. So what is your take on Chelsea as we start the season?
Still, the conundrum. I honestly don't know where they're going, but they're going to be, in my opinion, they're going to be a little box office team. They're going to be ones to watch. I think they're the sort of team that I think will get those sort of 6-2s, but then also just get hammered like 3-0 randomly by like West Ham. I just feel like they're going to be in such an up and down this season. That whole Neto and João Felix, though, that combination, they're calling them Netflix, is what they're calling it.
That's a nice name, actually. I'm a
fan. Right, like if they're calling them Netflix, then it's got to be box office football, right, for Chelsea. Let's just say that. But right, so for me, the way Chelsea are building from that kind of midfield, they just kind of brought in players that are just going to keep scoring goals, right? They've got in players, they've got in the likes of, like I said, João Felix, Pedro Neto, for example. Potential Ivan Toney is what I heard as well. If that happens, then, you know. And if you'd argue some of that midfield is clearing up. They've got Madueke, who's come out kind of out of nowhere. Solid player. No one really heard him that much and was brought in. And Marasco's doing some crazy kind of talk to the media about how if he doesn't need players and they just know where they are, like, it's fine. Like, I'm being upfront. I'm letting you know what the situation is. So I still think I think they're going to be very up and down. I honestly do. I think there'll be very little consistency, and we're going to be speaking on these episodes about how good Chelsea have been 1 week, and then like 2 weeks later, oh, what happened to that Chelsea performance? So I mean, Cole Palmer as well. Like they've just got players coming out their ears. So yeah, we'll see. I think we'll see.
Yeah, I'm curious to see as well. I think it will be a fun season for them and just fun for us to watch as neutrals in general. I do have them finishing in the top 4 because I think the amount of talent that they have, and if they can just rope it in slightly, I think they will be good to go. But yes, definitely fun to watch. Let's talk about some of the headlines really quickly. And before we dive into transfers, just related to Chelsea, there was an interview with Marseca, and he said the main goal, their target, is to start offloading players. Now, that's going to be interesting to me because I want to see what players are offloading. We're already talking about like Chilwell, Sterling, which we all knew, everybody knew that they were going to get out of the Chelsea squad in some fashion, but they still have a ton of players to get rid of. Now, we know that Chelsea do like to bring in some like younger players that do have talent and then loan them out. So I'm going to guess a good chunk of players will go out on loan, but their roster will still be bloated. I think they still have 6 or 7 goalkeepers on their official roster. So how does that look? What do they do? What are you expecting?
I mean, if he's going to sell them, then that solves your problems, right? If you can get rid of those players. But in my opinion, they've not really been in they've not even been in the window on the market, right? There's no like actual like. I've not seen them in any games. I've been like, oh, these sort of players are pretty good. These players can potentially be shipped off. They've got solid, I would argue, a solid squad. And these potential fringe players, if they sell them, then they're in a good place. You got Cole Palmer scoring for fun or assisting, 3 assists over the weekend, and which we'll get on to PFA player as well, which has been great for a player of his level as well, and the England performance he's put in as well. I say England performances could have potentially been. So yeah, I think if they start selling offloading players, then I think they'll be in a much better place because they've definitely got the squad to score and to run riot on teams. But it's just about whether they can shake off those players and get the right people in the right positions. Because I am seeing a slight bit of identity when I did watch this Chelsea and Wolves game. Granted, Wolves weren't great. So that maybe that's we need to take that into account. But I feel like Chelsea, the way Chelsea playing at the moment, there's definitely an identity there. I'm liking the likes of Cole Palmer in that middle of the park alongside, for example, Neto on the left and right. Like there's definitely players that can unlock teams. It's just about whether they bring consistency with that. So we'll see. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I just think the roster is so large. It's so scary. I have no idea what Chelsea are going to do about that. I do think the loan game will be a big piece of what they do, but then they have to sell some players because there's the FFP rules that they're going to have to get under. And if they're spending that amount of money on all these different players, like how do you survive that? And we know that you can get punished if there are other financial things that you're doing in a sketchy way. Like FFP will get you and you will get deducted points. And surely Chelsea are aware of that. So I have no idea what their game plan is because the window is closing quickly. They're going to really have to sell some players. I don't know what they're going to do. It's going to be an interesting ride to see in the next 10 days. And then we're going to keep staying on that Chelsea ride and see what it looks like throughout the season because it's going to be a heck of a journey. I'll tell you that much at least.
Speaking of FFP for 1 second, do you hear about this whole Dani Olmo registration issue at Barcelona?
Oh, Barcelona. How goofy.
I'm really not sure what's happening, but yeah, you can obviously see that the top line summary is obviously Dani Olmo, fantastic performances for Euros, if I do say that begrudgingly against England. But unfortunately, obviously, he wasn't able to be registered for the Barcelona squad. But recently, they have now registered him as an emergency registration because of Andreas Christensen's injury. So they can then bring him on to the squad, which again, very weird. Kind of, I mean, it doesn't shock me because it's Barcelona, and the way Barcelona are moving at the moment seems quite weird because apparently they're selling off their rights to their studio, like Barcelona Studio, Barca Studios, like their I think their TV and media kind of part as well. And then I think they've just released their own watches. I've just seen Barcelona like doing like a limited edition like link up with like Hublot or something like that, or Rolex, wherever it is. So they're doing a whole bunch of like cost like big ones trying to bring in money in, and obviously their wage bill needs to be lowered massively, and so the big players are heading out now, and yeah, it's never a dull day for Barcelona, right?
Yeah, it is very true. And I even heard that there's like another rumor of them trying to sign another player. I don't remember who it was, but then they weren't even able to sign Olmo officially to register him because the FFP ruling or whatever financial ruling that they have to get underneath or make sure that they structure correctly. So I don't even know why they're thinking about signing other players. They feel like the Chelsea of La Liga to me because they're just trying to bring in all these players, but they have no actual structure. They don't have any like business set up ready for this to try to figure out how they're bringing in players and what players need financially to be able to bring that in. Like there are set rules in place. Why do you not just know these rules or like print them out, laminate them, stick them on the wall of the dude that handles transfers so then you could just look up at that, double check as you're thinking, okay, let's see, Olmo's on the market. Maybe we should get him. Let's calculate. Do we have enough money to fit under that registration? We don't. Okay, maybe we don't look at him. Just ridiculous. Just so much mismanagement. It's crazy that mismanagement happens at that level with that amount of money, with that amount of resources available, with the business acumen that some of these people that are running clubs are supposed to have. It's just wild to me. So it's just crazy. But speaking of transfers, you want to dive into some of the transfers and the rumors that are happening around. So Crystal Palace are apparently moving for Arsenal striker Eddie Nketiah with a $30 million deal. So he was potentially going to Forest. However, that deal ends up falling through. And I think Nketiah and Arsenal are on the same page of wanting to move him on. He wants to get more regular playing time. Crystal Palace, do you think that's the place for him? How will he do? Will he get enough playing time for his liking?
Yeah, I think it's odd. I think if you look at the players that have if you look at Elise potentially and Mateta up front, but I feel like you want another player to kind of do that. Eze at the moment is definitely carrying, I would argue, this Crystal Palace team. If you watch some of the previous games, he's hit the post, hit the bar, like he's on corners, on free kicks. This is Eze's team at the moment, right? Like, but he needs some support. So 100% having Nketiah and his performances. What was the season he was at? He wasn't playing at Arsenal, right? And he scored, I remember quite a handful of goals here about Nketiah. So I think for sure, I think it makes sense. I think he's a South London boy as well. So always fits to have him into that place as well. So yeah, I think he'd be a fantastic addition.
Yeah, I think he would be a good plug-and-play option for Crystal Palace, who do need a little extra firepower to try to get them above that 10 spot, which is where I have them, and trying to get above 10 for the first time in their club history in the Premier League. So we'll see if that ends up happening. But staying with Palace, there are still talks now with Newcastle about Mark Gahey going that way. So we knew that Crystal Palace had a lot of good key players that performed well and that were surmised to be going out this window because a lot of larger clubs with more money were looking at diving into that Palace squad. Do you think if Gahey leaves, Crystal Palace will be missing a core piece that will not maybe see them sit mid-table? Where do you see them stacking up after all these transfer rumors?
Yeah, I think it's a weird one because if they get Nketiah, then I'm thinking maybe they're up front and their kind of midfield is sorted. But if they lose Gahey, then I feel like they're now going to be weak at the back. And I think if they keep Gahey, then I think they're in a much better position. Right? Gahey was one of Manchester. Potentially, I mean, we'd love that. We've got enough centre-backs. Let's calm down, right? Potentially, I mean, for England, he's fantastic at the Euros. Really came into his own. I think was one of our best players at centre-back. So he, I reckon, would get into pretty much any team. I thought there's any kind of centre-back. I think any team would take him as centre-back. So I think he definitely makes them stronger. And I think with like Dan, he might like a Dan Burn and Gahey kind of centre-back, I think it's a solid pairing, and I think would really boost the Newcastle because I feel like they had a really mixed start to the season. That like I think I had Isak in my team, my fantasy Premier League team, and didn't really score. And I had him again, and it's not really clicked for him. Anthony Gordon flying, we love that. But yeah, so Crystal Palace, if they can get that, then for me, I think they start. If Mark Gahey leaves Crystal Palace, then I don't think they maybe hit the predictions that I had in terms of them creeping into that top 10, which is going to be not great, but we'll see. We'll see.
I think it will be tough. I think they're going to lose a lot of core pieces, which is kind of a bummer because they were an exciting team to watch. So we'll keep an eye on them and see if all of these transfer rumors do come to fruition. Still with Chelsea. Yeah, you had mentioned it a little bit early on. Ivan Toney now rumored to potentially be going to Chelsea. I don't know why any players would want to go to Chelsea, seeing how the roster and transfers have already been managed. You know, it's kind of a mess. you're going to be going in unsure if you're playing. I mean, sure, you're probably going to get paid a decent chunk, but then also coming down the line is some type of FFP at least check-in to make sure all the boxes are being checked appropriately, which you got to guess that they wouldn't be unless they do have a quick fire sale in the next week or so. So I'm not quite sure why Ivan Toney would even want this deal. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe it's just a rumor out there. What's your thought on this one?
Yeah, I think everyone's thinking, let's make a nice little quick buck now, right? We're at Chelsea. You're not going to get into any of their team potentially. I mean, I'd love him at Man United. I think it'd really be. We've got enough strikers, I would argue. I say enough. Ten Hag thinks he's now got his 2 strikers, so he doesn't require anything else. But I think that he would have really uplifted the Manchester United team. I think he uplifts any team. He's a solid player, and I think Chelsea have seen him kind of as a player to kind of bring Nicholas Jackson a bit more into his own as well, potentially, and give him some support alongside that, not relying on perhaps midfield. So I think it's a fantastic for them. But I feel like, does he like elevate that Chelsea squad? Does he really bring them to a next level? But would he do that, say, for example, to like an Aston Villa, for example, or to an Everton? I feel like those are the teams that would really benefit from it and where they would like really love him. Like they would be like, this is striker. I think he'll kind of get a bit lost in the Pedros and Pedro Neto and João Felix and Cole Palmer. I feel like he's not going to get the love that he perhaps gets at Brentford. I think he's going to realise that very quickly. So we'll see. I see how that kind of pans out for him. But I think he's a great player.
Yeah, I think he's a great player as well. I think if he went to Everton, I would probably become an Everton fan just because I like Everton as a club. Their history is pretty cool. I was able to see at least the outside of their stadium, which was kind of neat when I was over in England. So I could definitely be an Everton fan. Plus, Lena Donovan played on Everton, one of the USA. Yep, Tim Howard. So big fan of what Everton have done. So if they could bring in someone like Ivan Toney and become a bit more exciting, I could be there for that. So I would appreciate it.
I just as we were thinking about players, like they've had some really great players. You remember Leighton Baines, one of my favourite, like Marion Fellaini as well, Everton man. Tim Cahill, Gary Cahill as our centre back as well. Tim Cahill as our Australian. We love Tim Cahill. Landon Donovan, as you spoke about as well. Who else? Seamus Coleman. I think he still plays potentially. Seamus Coleman, great players.
I think he might. Yeah, a lot of cool players at Everton, which I appreciate the history and like a good reason why they have stayed up in the Premier League this long. And hopefully they can figure it out this season. David
Moyes and remember Lukaku was in there as well. Like I remember that Man United game where I think we lost 3-2. I think it was when Ferguson was in charge, and I think we won away his penultimate game potentially. But seeing that Marion Fellaini like head down to Lukaku scoring, like getting 3-2. I remember those things.
And Rooney hanging out there too. So,
oh wow, how did I forget? Wayne?
Everton's the spot, man.
Have you seen that video, by the way, going around of Wayne Rooney? I think he's in training of some sort, or he's perhaps training with his current team. Is it Plymouth? He's at Plymouth, I think he is. But I think
I don't even know. He's been bouncing around.
I think he's in one of those teams. I think he's training with the team as well, and he's still got it. The ball's coming into him. His vision, picking up the ball, like it's great. It's in training, but it's really great to see.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, if you play at that level, you probably don't lose it. So that's great to see. Let me talk to you about the last 2 transfers on my list, and then we can maybe talk about some of the other things happening around the world of soccer. Some good and some a little crazy. The last 2 are involving Arsenal. Arsenal are good as it is. So I think if they're locked in with the squad that they currently have, I still fancy them to beat out City for the title. It's going to be a tight race. However, City now snagging a Barcelona player in Gundogan. If that ends up fully happening, we'll see. I'm not fully sure if that has completed or yet, but I know there was talks of him wanting to go out of the squad. Plus, he's one of the highest earners at Barcelona. So getting him off the books would be beneficial for Barcelona. And if it was a free transfer or a low amount of money transfer for City, I think City would be happy with that because he knows the system. He's only 1 year removed from playing for City. So just adding a little bit of depth in there, I think would be beneficial for City. So I do think that would strengthen City. Then there is now a confirmed transfer with Arsenal. It's Mikel Merino going to Arsenal. He is, I think, a great pickup. He already passed his medical, so this is happening. Adding some depth to that midfield, I think he is the type of player that will fit Arsenal well, and he's one of the players where I talk about he is a role player. He can certainly start games, but you don't anticipate him starting every game, and he just fits into that role of building out of the back and then transitioning into offensive play. So seeing him in an Arsenal squad, I think, will be very beneficial for them and really set them up to try to compete with City. But not only that, there have been rumors. Now, this one is probably just a rumor. We'll have to see if it happens or not. But Nico Williams could be going over to Arsenal. Now, if that happens, this Arsenal team will just be so stacked and so deep that it's ridiculous. And they're going to be even more exciting to watch already than they currently are. So if he swings over to Arsenal, the rumor is that it would be around £50 million. Now, that one is still a fresh rumor. We'll see if anything comes about from that. But I don't know how you turn down a Nico Williams signing. Arsenal signings currently, how are they looking for you? What do you think? How they stack up?
Yeah, I think, as you said, if they get that Nico Williams, then yeah, that is... Imagine that down the wing. They've just got that. I think they would probably be the most complete squad. I think they can genuinely challenge City, I would argue. I think they challenge them now, but I feel like, do they go all the way? I still think, and I still maintain this, I think you said Arsenal win the league, didn't you? And I say City. I think a City going to win, and I think at the moment, off the back of these 2 games, granted 2 games, I feel like genuinely it's going to be, business as usual for City on this. I just can't see that. I just feel like if you look at the squad, there isn't any kinks, I think, in that squad, in that City squad. And bringing Gundogan back as well, which was, I think, is a great buy. He's a great player for City across the board, right? And great for Germany, who has actually retired from Germany as well, which we'll get into a bit more as well, from German football. So it's just very interesting to kind of see what Arsenal are trying to do with it. Mikel Merino, great player. He scored, I think, it was an extra time game, I think it was, in the Euros. And, a solid player. I think he would definitely elevate them as well. If you look at Calafiori at the back as well, they can bring in these players. They've got players at the moment, and a kind of embarrassment and riches, really, because they're all players are flying. Trossard's scoring for fun. Declan Rice still solid as ever. You've got, your players all around, which are just solid, and I don't think his addition will just elevate them even further as well. So, if that goes through, I don't know. Then I think City maybe win by less points than I already think they will. That's just my opinion on it, and maybe extra tight potentially in the top half. But we shall see, man.
Yeah, I'm still back in Arsenal, taking home the crown. Time will tell. But all right, where do you want to take us from here?
Yeah, man, let's go. As I kind of mentioned, obviously a couple of retirees. This is the year, feels like the year of potential sort of like retirees from the world of football. So I'm just going to bring out a couple of people that are retired in 2024. So this obviously means from the game, from the beautiful game. So you're not counting Gundogan, who is still playing for Man City, but obviously still has left the German squad. So let me just bring up a couple of these areas, right? So number one, it's no shocker, really, right? We know Pepe. Pepe is a Portuguese defender, solid, played with, at Madrid with Cristiano Ronaldo, like just multiple titles with Real Madrid, and also as part of that Portuguese Euro-winning team, solid defender. There's always a red card or a yellow card in there somewhere. Right, so I think he's probably got quite a lot of red cards there. So Pepe is 41 years old, mind you. So that is a ripe old age to have played a centre back. So not even just like a goalkeeper, for example, that age, like an actual centre back where you're hurrying players, you're chasing players. I would argue it's more like a young man's, like a centre back is not necessarily an old person's game. You need to be really nimble and get chased out. You're going to get players zipping past you. So Pepe is one. Obviously, we know this one because there was a lot made about it in the Euros. And I think, is it a big miss to Real Madrid? Probably not. Toni Kroos, 34 years old, which is 1 year older than me. And if I could retire from everything, I would. So that's not happening anytime soon. But Toni Kroos, German, obviously midfielder, lifting the Real Madrid Champions Leagues with Real Madrid, for example, and also the medium performance, should we say, at the Euros, unfortunately getting knocked out So yeah, that is Tony Cruz's last game. He's no longer playing football, but what a miss. I mean, incredible. 34 years old, absolute boot on him as well, which is fantastic. We've also got a couple of we've got three of the final players, and I want to kind of see who you think were the biggest loss to football. Right, the next one, Thiago Alcantara. So 33, leaving Liverpool, had some really good spells at Liverpool. Was a solid player at Barcelona. Has had some exceptional passing ranges, and as we know, and played some great performances. But he had a lot of injury struggles as well. So, Alcantara, I think, is also another one. So he's also retired. And then a couple of random ones, which I didn't really know of, but so remember Ryan Bertrand? Chelsea, Southampton, I think it was as well. So he is also he's also the left back has announced his retirement after being a year without a club. I really liked Bertrand, one of the England players at one point, solid player, but unfortunately, when you're in that left back, right back positions, it's another one of those areas in defence where you're really going to be switched on, and you will get rinsed potentially by the same England players. And a couple other ones, Joe Hart. So ex-Man City man, we know very well as Man United fans, Joe Hart was that staple of that Man City squad that won the league, and also England, great player. Was at Celtic for a bit as well. He's also retired. I think I saw him recently on Match of the Day. So he's moving to that area. And the final one, we mentioned him already, Marouane Fellaini. So he is also retired, but he retired in February this year. So just another kind of one we know. As a Man United fan, why Moyes brought him in. We can see some of the goals that he's scored, getting into the middle of the park. He's a person to aim at for sure. And I really liked him. So that is also Marouane Fellaini. So we've got about 5 players in the moment in that space who retired. Who is your biggest loss to football, you think?
I mean, the right answer is Tony Cruz. I mean, he's still could be playing a big role for Real Madrid. He could be doing that for other teams as well. So I still think he's a player that could make a difference for some of those top echelon clubs. So easy pick for me from him. However, one of the side selections I'm going to make is actually a player not on your list. Wojciech Szczesny has retired. So a goalkeeper for Juventus, also played for Arsenal, and also a keeper for Poland, one of the national teams that I support, with Schwalik being a Polish name as well. So Szczesny, one of the true OGs to hold it down for the Poland national team, one of our best players that has come through Poland. So sad to see him depart on his retirement journey, but always a fun character to watch in the net, and had a great career along the way as well for all of his clubs too. So he's going to be my goalkeeper pick after Tony Cruz.
Yeah, I think that's solid, actually. I think great. He played at Arsenal at one point. Remember Szczesny at Arsenal was great. I agree. I think Tony Cruz is one of those ones. But I think if you're looking for the world of football, I think if you think about Pepe from like a defensive perspective, you think all the accolades that he's won. And when I think of Pepe, I think of the times where he's been at the Euros. Like that's the time where you majority watch him. And as an England fan, watching that Portuguese team, just incredible, right? Flying with Cristiano Ronaldo on that side as well. And when Ronaldo was in his peak, you always had Pepe at centre back, and he was going into some crunching tackles. So incredible player. So for me, I think it's between those two, and I think that's the solid side of it for me. So before we get on to some more sad news about the passing of a Sven-Göran Eriksson, before we get into that as well. So is there any player that perhaps, any retired player that you'd bring back today? So is there one player that you think retired of the past? There's a lot to choose from. Is there one player that you think, yeah, I'd love to see them in today's game?
There are two that come to mind. Instantly, my favorite player of all time, Landon Donovan. So if I could watch him on a pitch again at any point in time, whether he's playing for Everton or whether he's playing back at the LA Galaxy, I would pay money to watch him play in a game again, because loved his play style. I have a similar play style. Like, he scores many more goals than I did in my miniature career, and much more of an attacking threat, but he could just run 24/7. Like, he just had an unlimited battery. That was my play style. Like, I was a midfielder where I could just run a ton. So not only was he a cool player, I kind of identified with his play style too. So favorite player, would love to see him come back. Also, Van Persie. He was so exciting to watch throughout his club and national team career. Was just a joy when he was on the pitch. Scored some awesome goals and just fun to watch. Like a true number 9. We missed those in today's game. So would love to get him back onto a pitch to watch him. What about you?
As I asked this question, I was thinking which ones it might be. And there's such a huge amount of people. I think one player I've seen take. I mean, Zinedine Zidane would be insane to sort of see. I think the way, if you look at some of the clips, and obviously as football fans, we all know of the quality of Zinedine Zidane. But the way I've watched back some recent clips, and he's so calm on the ball, and some of the touches are insanely good. And I think that's just incredible. And then the other one, potentially, I was going to look at maybe the likes like Luis Figo. I loved Luis Figo. I say loved loosely. He'd always kick England out in some capacity. So Luis Figo. And the final one, really, and this might be a bit left field, really, as I thought about this, Dimitar Berbatov. Now,
Heck of a player.
Genuinely, if you obviously you're listeners of the podcast, you know when we mean Dimitar Berbatov, very underrated player, right? Yeah, he didn't win all the accolades, but for Manchester United, some of those clips that you see, how again very similar to Zidane in terms of like very eloquent on the ball, but some of those touches were insane. There's never been a player like him since. I honestly can't think of a player like. I think about Dimitar Berbatov. It takes me back to the days of that AIG kit, you know, where it's like black long sleeves, gloves on, like little headband in, and that black kind of AIG kind of top, just fluid with it. So for me, incredible player, and I would love to see him. And I've seen he's a big Man United man in terms of posting about the game quite regularly. I'm almost like a bit of an ambassador for Manchester now, which I'd love to see. So Dimitar Berbatov, I mean, just there's no player like him since. I'd love to see a player like him, but I feel they'd almost coach out that kind of like smooth play on the ball. Like if you imagine today, you're trying to sort of recruit players, for example. Yes, someone's cool on the ball, but if someone does that faster, you would like to take them. It's no longer to be like, you're going to get caught on the ball now. Maybe because other players are faster. I don't know. But it just feels like if you're on the ball and you're taking longer touches or you're a bit more kind of composed with it, you're not really. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's like what I tell my players all the time, especially in the college game. You have to play so fast. You have to know where you're going before the ball even gets to you. Your touches have to be quick. I want no more than 2 touches when you're on the ball, unless you have space to drive. Yeah, so it's probably a little bit of a different game now, but Berbatov, if you have any NJCAA eligibility, we'll still take you, so hit us up.
So you heard it, Berbatov coming to the US, we'd love that. Before we close out and when we get into our take it or leaves it, you got your take it or leave it to come through. And we'll get into our Nutmegged. We've had obviously Sven-Göran Eriksson pass away recently. So Sven-Göran Eriksson, as an England fan, was a Swedish football manager, but quite a big one for England fans as well. So he recently passed away due to 76 due to pancreatic cancer recently. He was the first foreign manager of the England national team, 2001, 2006, going through 3 major tournaments, but obviously we didn't win anything. But Sven-Göran Eriksson has always been one of those managers, for me especially, growing up, that 2001, 2006, always watching those sorts of games. He's the one that had, for example, tried to bring in that Gerrard Lampard pivot in the middle. He's a sort of player, I would argue that, people look back on him and go, was he really the best manager? But at that England time, he's a manager I grew up watching England underperform with, let's say, but still was insane. And he had a very successful, I would say, managerial career. There was 18 trophies, like Lazio, Benfica, Roma as well, and obviously Man City. We knew him as a Man City manager as well. So, and there's a recent documentary out. I don't know if anyone's seen that as well. You might have seen that as well. I think it's on Netflix potentially. And it's Sven-Göran Eriksson talking about his life. And I think he does a goodbye message actually right at the very end of this documentary. So, solid manager, and it's obviously quite a sad one to passing, obviously, from pancreatic cancer at the 76 as well. He obviously had his infamous background as well. There was the behind closed doors elements as well that, he made him very famous in the news as well, which was interesting to kind of see. That was a time of where the tabloids, anything newsworthy or anything non-newsworthy around football or managers would just come into play. So, Sven-Göran Eriksson unfortunately passed away. So, sad times. But, brought in a wave of new managers in now. So that's really great to see.
Yeah, it is always tough when you lose a big soccer personality like that, whether it's someone that creates drama, whether it's someone that has led teams. It's always a tough loss. And he kind of came about before my soccer fandom peaked, where I was aware of worldwide things. So I'm not the most well-versed in Eriksson, but always love to hear stories about managers in particular that have built personalities, because now being on the manager side of my soccer career, you really get to see how you impact players, because there's just always this saying that has stuck with me, where as a player or as a coach, you have so many different players that you coach throughout your career. However, players only have a handful of coaches, so you get to really leave such a big impact. So any manager out there who's able to have an illustrious career like that and to lead some solid players and solid careers, love to see it.
Great. So let's get on to, first do your take it or leave it before we get into the nutmeg. So I'm not going to let you go that easily. So take it or leave it. Where you go first?
I'm not letting you go easily either. So this one involves our club, Manchester United. So take this or leave it. Chelsea are closer to winning the Premier League right now than Manchester United.
You knew what you were doing with that question.
Oh, I know. So we'll see if you are going to hold true to your Premier League predictions or not.
Do I take it or leave it? That's me admitting that I would say, obviously at the moment in this current play that Chelsea are probably a better team than Manchester United at the moment.
Right.
Yeah. Do you know what? No, I'm going to back myself. I think Man United, I know this sounds kind of deluded.
You're so stressed. You're so stressed right now.
But let's be real. So they lost to Man City, right? So, put that as a separate side, right? Both teams, I think Man United have got more consistency in them than Chelsea would. That's my opinion. Yes, I think probably on paper, Chelsea have a better squad, but I feel like strategically, Maresca, is it? Maresca?
Yeah, Maresca.
I just feel like Ten Hag, I would argue, is a better manager than Maresca. And that's probably more of a take it or leave it situation. Who's a better manager, Ten Hag or Maresca? I feel like Ten Hag is probably a little better strategically. And I think he would do better with the players that we have than Maresca will do with the players that he's got. So I would say over the long run, Man United are probably, would say, closer. But right now, on paper, better squad, Chelsea. So I'm being diplomatic. Long term, Man United. Short term, Chelsea. That's what I say.
So you're saying, essentially with that answer, you're answering the question of saying short term, it's going to be Chelsea. Because who wins the Premier League first, essentially, out of those two? So you're saying it's most likely going to be Chelsea.
Okay. So your question is, this season, Chelsea are more likely to win than Man United?
No, not necessarily this season. So who's closer, just in general as a club, to winning the Premier League? So you just answered it without even knowing that. Yeah. So you just said Chelsea pretty much.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, I think that, and that's mainly because on paper they've just got a better players, and they should perform better than Man United. That's mainly because of that. But if you look at it long term, yeah, which is sad, but we will move. It's fine.
Yeah, I think kind of in the same boat. I think just with the resources and the players that Chelsea are bringing in, and obviously the ability for Ted Boehly to sell, or to buy players. I mean, maybe to sell. Hopefully he needs to sell if he's trying to do FFP stuff. But his ability to just spend money and try to bring in players makes me think that at least with the resources he has, they could maybe create some type of actual club structure that would get them to the point where they could win the Premier League probably faster than Man United, because Man United are seeming to take a little bit more of a slower structured approach. And like we talked about at the beginning of this episode, their transfer strategy still makes me a little bit nervous, and they don't have quite the identity. But they're coming out of a period where they're just filled with so much drama and uncertainty and poor ownership. And that, unfortunately, is still kind of carrying over because the Glazers are still around. So I think that makes me nervous as well. So fully until maybe the Glazers are out or we see some actual changes happening, I still think I would go Chelsea as well, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, and it's sad because Man United have done, I would argue, probably better in the transfer market from a long-term perspective. They knew what they wanted to do to plug gaps, but Chelsea has gone out and gone, we'll have that player, we'll have that player, and we'll have that player. And then players are going, yeah, cool, no worries. They literally have Conference League, Europa League. Let's just clarify that as well. So the likes of João Felix and like Cole Palmer and Cuckoo haven't even got like fully European football. So let's just put that into perspective as well. So, yeah, nuts. Now we're getting to the nutmegs of the week. I'll start with mine. And ironically, it's a very Chelsea episode, this is. I hate that feeling, but it is a very Chelsea episode. So my nutmeg of the week is around the Chelsea versus Wolves game that happened, and obviously 6-2 for Chelsea. So Madueke, who hit a hat trick, for Chelsea, and obviously did a solid performance. Prior to the match, he posts a Instagram, apparently it's a post and delete, which is meant to be for his burner account, which we all know is a second account that we all have, potentially in the background that. And potentially that celebrities tend to have quite a lot. So he obviously meant to post them there, and he essentially says that Wolverhampton, I also take that personally, just clarify that, right? So he says that Wolverhampton is, ish, essentially, use that sort of terminology, which obviously didn't great, put down Wolverhampton in terms of the city, and then was obviously massively ridiculed all over social media, like what's going on. There's dude on the pitch, for example. So already there's a massive nutmeg there. I mean, how are you posting that and then going to the stadium to then play? However, hitting a hat trick. I mean, if you say that and you take home the match ball, there's just such a weird. He switched the narrative very quickly from, yes, I did post that and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. He did come out and say apologies. Look, I didn't mean to. That's not what I feel about the city at all. Like, I'm sure it's a great city, but apologies. And then he's taken on the match ball. It's a way of just switching it. So fair play to Madueke, man. That's crazy. But yeah, shouldn't be posting things like that. But hey, fair play to him.
Yeah, it's wild when players do that. If you have a burner account, you got to be smart enough, or at least aware enough, to know which account you're posting on when it comes to social media. Because social media is just so annoying, especially when it comes to like team management. And you have different personalities in clubs and on teams, and there are going to be players that do stuff like that. So it's a little wild, but I mean, at least you can back up what you say by playing well. So it is what it is, and it just maybe adds to the drama of the game. Now, let us add to some more drama with with not my take it or leave it, but with my nutmeg of the week, because I would be leaving this one if this was a take it or leave it. So actually, we got some college soccer happening, and this was in the U.S., of course. So it was a match between Rutgers and the University of Massachusetts. This happened just like a couple days ago, and this clip has been going all over social media. A brawl went down in this women's match, Rutgers and UMass. I think it was 10 minutes into the second half. It was a close game. I think it might have still been tied 0-0 at that specific point in time. But there was a sequence of play happening on the far side of the pitch, and the Massachusetts player ends up going on the far side of the pitch trying to do some defense, and there was a Rutgers player, it was a forward, dribbling with the ball, ends up getting fouled. Then she gets up off the grass, and then the other player tries to cover the ball so that they can't restart quickly. Then a full swing comes out from one of the players trying to hit the other player. Then that player starts swinging. They get into this brawl. They start pulling hair, trying to sling each other around, and then it only gets broken up after a few minutes by some of the players trying to pull those two individuals apart. So you never love to see the brawls in types of those games, but again, kind of talking about different personalities in soccer players, you just kind of have to manage that. We saw that with Timothy Weah in the CONCACAF situation. Not CONCACAF. What was the big tournament we just talked about that was going on with the Euros?
Copa America?
Copa America. There we go. CONCACAF is the region. We're not talking about that. But yeah, that swing that Weah did, just shoving that player randomly off the ball that got him a red card and ejected. You just have to manage your temper. And this is maybe like the coaching perspective talking too, but you got to make sure as a coach, you're getting your players mentally prepared for those types of games, because college ball is tough. Even when I played in college, like players on the pitch are very physical. They're going to try to get in your head. They don't care. They say the weirdest stuff. And it is sometimes frightening how weird and awkward and crazy some of the stuff that is said. But you just got to lock in. You got to have that mentality of knowing, hey, those players are going to be out there trying to get under your skin to make you screw up or do something incorrectly, which obviously trying to punch someone in the face is incorrect, because then that puts you under the bus, because then you're losing a player, you're down a man, it doesn't work out. So never love to see that from a player. Get your mentality right. Make sure that you're there to support your team to try to get the dub. And just don't fight, straight up. But that's my nutmeg.
That is the nutmeg, and it's passion at the game as well. Sometimes people just don't think, and it's a case of like seeing red. Sometimes the amount of times it happens on full pitches all across the world, it just kicks off and it just boils over. And you're right, the mentality part of it's got to be so strong. The players really need to know that when they're playing football, it's also like a mind game. There's a lot of mind games that are happening on the pitch, potentially off the pitch with these managers. Jose Mourinho was the king of mind games. So a lot of it is about that. You've got to keep your head cool if you do want to take that victory, and use that energy, that negative energy you might have, and put it into the pitch and score those goals or defend well and get over the line. I think that's really important for those sorts of games.
Yeah, I agree. It's just sad to see, but yeah, it's all about that mentality. And you're right, the passion of the game, it just brings out a lot in all of us. I've been there too, so you just got to practice that. Make sure you have that right mentality going in every game, and just love it. You just love the game. It's so fun. All this crazy stuff. That's why we're here.
There we go. And that is why we're here. And what a way to close out the show. It's been a pleasure, mate. As always, we've done lots of really interesting things today with this particular podcast. Let me put my teeth back in. This podcast episode jam-packed with lots of stuff. It's been great speaking to you as usual, mate. This has been another end to Nutmegged. Do follow us on social media, of course. And if you do be able to find a pitch, make sure you don't get nutmegged. See you guys later.
Peace.